Hello and welcome. Indian Voices, an anthology of Indian writing in English. This is the title of the textbook that has been prescribed for semester 5, BA in English Language and Literature, Kerala University. The first poem in the textbook is Henry Derozio's The Harp of India. As we have already seen in the introductory session, Henry Derozio belongs to the age of pioneers, which is the 50-year period from 1820 to 1870. We've also seen that the poems written during this period were quite similar to the British English poetry of the times. Derozio was influenced by the English poets Lord Byron and Walter Scott. In fact, he was the first Indian to attempt romantic poetry in English and hence rightly called the first Indian English poet. However, the popularity of his poems had suffered a setback, and so the collection of his works titled Poems of Henry Louis Vivian Derozio was published with the subtitle Forgotten Indo-Anglian Poet. He was a moving spirit behind Indo-Anglian poetry, which was still in its beginning stage during the first quarter of the 19th century. The Romantic poets Lord Byron, Walter Scott, and Chatterton had a great influence on his poetry. In fact, the effects of Romanticism can be seen in the choice of themes for his poems. His poems dealt with the themes of death, futility, melancholy, love, and so on. They were also attempts at escaping from reality, much like the poems of the English Romantic poets. Derozio was also the first Indo-Anglian poet to express patriotic feelings in his poetry. He loved India and gave expression to his patriotic sentiments in his sonnets To India, My Native Land and The Harp of India. While his poems were the first expression of nationalist thoughts, Derozio also sounded the first echo of Western ideas in them. He was the first Indo-Anglian poet to use Indian themes, Indian sentiments, Indian mythology, and Indian imagery in poems. But his poems have also been criticized for their lack of emotional depth and originality of expression. However, his poems have exceptional narrative power and the character portrayal in them is also remarkable. Henry Derozio was born to an Indo-Portuguese father and an English mother. His first volume of poems was published when he was just 18 years old. He has worked as an editor for several magazines before taking up a career in teaching at Hindu College. But he could not continue in teaching for long and turned to journalism. He founded the East Indian, the first newspaper to represent the Anglo-Indian community. He was a liberalist who constantly fought against racial and caste segregation. Derozio's early death at the age of 23 was a great loss to India, much like Keats's death. Both the poets had a passionate temperament and also a deep sympathy for nature. The word sonnet comes from the Italian sonetto, meaning little song. The sonnet is a 14-line poem written in iambic pentameter, employing one of the several rhyme schemes and sticking to a tightly structured thematic organization. The two sonnet forms, the Petrarchan and the Shakespearean, provide the models from which all other sonnets are formed. The Petrarchan sonnet is divided into two stanzas, the octave or the first 8 lines, followed by the answering sestet or the final 6 lines. The rhyme scheme is ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE or CD, CD, CD. The Shakespearean or English sonnet follows a different set of rules. 3 quatrains and a couplet follow the rhyme scheme AB AB, CD CD, EF EF, GG. The couplet plays a pivotal role and often creates an epiphanic quality to the end. The Miltonic sonnets also took liberties with the form, allowing the octave to run into the sestet. The Spenserian sonnet, invented by the 16th century English poet Edmund Spenser, has the structure from the Shakespearean, that is 3 quatrains and a couplet. But Spenserian sonnets employ connecting couplet links between quatrains, as in the rhyme scheme AB AB, BC BC, CD CD, EE. The Harp of India. The poem is divided into 2 septets or 7-line stanzas, as different from the structure of the traditional sonnet. But in keeping with the tradition, the first stanza is a presentation of a problem. So let us see what the problem is. Look at the title of the poem, The Harp of India. In fact, the harp is a metaphor for Indian poetic tradition. The sonnet opens with a question addressed to the harp. That is, the harp is personified in the opening line. Why hangest thou lonely on yon withered bough? That personification, as you might know, is a figure of speech in which something that is not human is given human characteristics. The harp of Indian poetry is supposed to be in a state of mind that is lonely. The word yon, it's an old-fashioned expression or a dialect word which means that or somewhere far at a distance. The boughs or the branches of the tree look withered, as if it is approaching death. Now the implication is that Indian poetry is on the verge of death, or poetic imagination that can give rise to fine poetry has dried up. Look at the second line. Unstrung forever must thou there remain. Again, that's a question. Is it fair that you should remain unstrung forever? That is, nobody is playing the harp now. It is just lying there unused. The poet wishes to remind the harp in the third line that thy music once was sweet. Who hears it now? So once upon a time, the harp used to play beautiful melodies. But unfortunately, no one wants to listen to those good old sweet songs anymore. The allusion is probably to the classic poetic compositions of the past. What he means is the times have changed, and probably the present generation, the new generation, has lost the ability to appreciate the delicate artistry and finesse of ancient poetry. The fourth line, why doth the breeze sigh over thee in vain? So you have a few questions in the opening quatrain. Gentle breeze caresses the strings of the harp, but it cannot produce any music, and so it sighs in vain. Sad that all attempts at reviving the once rich poetic tradition have failed. The breeze could be referring to the ineffectual efforts of some poets to bring back to life the dying poetic tradition of India. But they're not successful. So silence hath bound thee with her fatal chain. So why are they unsuccessful? Why is it that the efforts of some of the poets to bring back the once rich poetic tradition have failed? Derozio has a reason. They have been silenced and put in fetters by an oppressive British imperialism. So silence again is spoken of as a person here. So you have personification there as well. Silence hath bound thee with her fatal chain. The chains are fatal and can silence you forever. Neglected, mute, and desolate art thou. The harp is neglected, it has been abandoned and also left mute. Like ruined monument on desert plain. Simile is used in the line comparing poetry to a monument that is now in ruins. So this is where the first stanza ends, the presentation of the problem. And the problem is that the old and rich poetic tradition of India is dying. And the second stanza, which is made up of another 7 lines, or which is a sestet, begins with the exclamation, "Oh!" Oh is a figure of speech introduced by the vocative exclamation. It's called an apostrophe. It is different from the punctuation mark apostrophe. So here, "Oh" is used to indicate surprise, anguish, dejection, and so on. Oh, many a hand, more worthy far than mine. That is, there must be many hands that are worthier than mine. So here, the word the word hands denote poets, and the figure of speech used there is synecdoche. Synecdoche is a figure of speech where a part is made to represent the whole or vice versa. The poet in the next line, "Once thy harmonious chords to sweetness gave." That is, the poet remembers the time when the harp used to play mellifluous music, and many a wreath for them did fame entwine. That is, when the harp played melodious music, fame would string flowers into wreaths. So this again is a reference to ancient poetry, which was well received and appreciated by all once upon a time. Again, you have personification, where the wreath for them did fame. Fame is personified there. In fact, I would like to mention that pathetic fallacy is also a kind of personification. I don't know if you are familiar with the figure of speech called pathetic fallacy. It is a kind of personification that gives human emotions to inanimate objects. But personification is a rather broad term. Of flowers still blooming on the minstrel's grave. The poet, the flowers, they still bloom, but they now bloom on the graves of these minstrels or the ancient singers of beautiful lyrics. Those hands are cold, but if thy notes divine, the hands which wrote the poems are now cold or dead. See, those hands are cold, but if thy notes divine may be by mortal vacant once again, harp of my country, let me strike the strain. That is, even though the hands who wrote the poems are now cold or dead, the poet still has hope or he still has, he's optimistic, or he shows his optimism or hope in the lines where he talks about the possibility of rekindling the divine fire of imagination and creativity. In the concluding line, he invokes the harp once again and says that he hopes to play the harp and produce music that will revive the lost tradition of Indian classical poetry yet once again. Thank you.